Hello, everyone, and welcome to VOD of Consciousness with Sientir. That would be me. And today we are going to capture at least one elite skill, and hopefully that shouldn't take very long. So hopefully we should make our way also to the next zone from which I can capture another elite skill that I want to capture. So this one is going to be Crippling Anguish, which you find in Drazak Thicket. So it's actually pretty close to here. We passed by it, in fact. I'm going to go ahead and put my Sentinel of the Kurzix on, because why not? We passed by it on our way to the Eternal Grove, but I was not capturing Mesmer Elite skills at the time, so I did not get it then. So this particular elite skill can be found over this way. Like I said, Crippling Anguish. And then the next one requires us to go to a zone that we have not gotten to yet, so that'll be exciting. Yeah, just that guy right over there. So how about no? Let's try to remember how my skills work. This is using a skill. Okay. So I specifically want to use that when enemies are using skills. I don't know how much I'm going to use that, but whatever. I've certainly been enjoying doing stuff on my Paragon here. Nope, don't want to let it get off Ether Feast. That would be annoying. Ether Feast is just a heal skill. So there's Crippling Anguish. Doesn't look very good because I don't have any points in illusion magic, but you know. Pretty good when you have points in illusion magic. Haha, use that on that guy for no good value. Actually, we don't really need to continue fighting stuff here, so I'm just going to pop over to Vasberg Armory. So the next spot that I want to go... let's see, do I want to... No, that's just single target, so whatever. I'm not going to cross the paths of anything that I want stuff from, so I'm just going to throw that on. And throw that on. Okay. So, the next spot that I want to go is actually out in Morstave Trail. I'm not sure if it's optimal to go from Unwaking Waters or from here, but it's down here is an outpost that I want to get to. And that will allow me to be able to get to the zone that I'm wanting to actually get to. So you'll notice Brother Menlo's not hanging out this time, etc. I'm going to go along this southern path here. And last time I was beginning to talk about a subject that I think is really interesting and that I really like to explore more, which is the idea of increasing game replayability through randomness, particularly when a game... some of its interest is focused on trying to understand how to handle a specific encounter. I think it's really compelling to basically try to figure out how to handle that through, or how to add more of that, I should say, to your game using random number generators. And now this isn't just like throwing stuff at the wind, and as it were, but it's an intentional application of random numbers. I'm just sitting here to let Olias make some more minions. And there's a specific, what's the right phrase for it? A specific skill involved, I think, in identifying ways of using randomness to add to the compelling factor of the game. And you have to simultaneously be careful when you're doing this to not make the game less compelling. Randomness well applied, I think, can be a big boon to games. Randomness ill applied can be a detriment. So, I don't know why he used Shield of Deflection on me, but whatever. So, I am particularly interested in a couple of ideas that I've seen. So, one that I was talking about last time is the way the Dark Souls 1 board game... or I guess it's just the Dark Souls board game. It's got stuff from 1 and 3. But how that game utilizes randomness. I don't want to fight Nandit. To change up the encounters, but the encounters are themselves like predefined. And this sort of thing I think is really interesting as an area where there's a lot of potentially very fruitful design. Notably, I think that could be a way of setting up areas with specific encounter locations, but changing up how those encounters are handled in order to add some more interest to the design on repeated playthroughs. So what I would do is like, oh, when you play it this time, it's configured this way. When you play it this time, it's configured this way. That sort of thing. So not to be confused with just like straight up randomness where there's no like design to it. But one of the other things that I find really interesting and really compelling is the randomizers that have been done for a number of games. There is one for Dark Souls 1's items. There have been variants on it that have been done slightly different ways for the other Dark Souls games too, actually. There's also the Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past has a very robust randomization system. There's some interesting ones for some of the Pokemon games, some of the older ones in particular. And then there's also kind of the first one that I saw in this line was the... Do I want to go down there and deal with that guy? I mean, kind of. It's kind of in my path. There's also some very interesting ones for... oh, that guy's just... He's just quick shot. Okay, that's not... terribly dangerous. Let's not deal with him. Let's deal with this guy. Yeah, that seems better. And the so the Ocarina of Time beta quest is kind of the first time that I really saw a randomizer. And what that does is it changes zone transitions. So it's really interesting to me about the way that this works is you kind of know what each map area does in Ocarina of Time. When you go to an area in Ocarina of Time, you're not surprised to find what you find there. But when things are connected a different way, it becomes a very different experience, and it makes navigating the world very different. And I find that to be very interesting. And we want to get this thing. This thing's going to be annoying. Oh yeah, that thing is annoying. And there's two of them. Great. So, what this means is that it combines the familiar with the unfamiliar. Familiar zones, but an unfamiliar layout. Now, because the zones were made to go together in a specific way, this usually leaves some amount of nonsense in terms of the actual experience of how the zones are arranged now. But what that means is that the area that you like, the result of that allows you to kind of think through how you're getting to spaces differently. So, in other words, by changing up the world connections, it changes the world and it changes the importance of various zones. One of the things that you'll see in Beta Quest is that certain areas become a lot more, shall we say, popular, because, well, frankly, you have reason to encounter them a lot more often. So a good example of this is Gerudo Fortress, which by itself in the standard game, as it were, you do encounter to a certain degree. But what you run into, it's its own area, right? But it has a lot of zone transitions inside and outside of the fortress. So the result of this is all of these transitions is when things get randomized, you end up traveling through it a lot more. So it's a zone that, in the normal game, is fairly isolated. you don't tend to have a lot of interplay with interacting with it, that sort of thing. I was wondering if there would be crumbling pillars here. And in Beta Quest, it suddenly becomes a massive thoroughfare. So this to me is really interesting because it changes how you interact with the place. And I like that. I think it's really interesting. And it makes me think of also how can you set stuff up so that way the way that you get around the world becomes different on different playthroughs. And I think what particularly is compelling to me about this is the Tainted Flesh boss. Beta Quest in particular is that it is fundamentally a, how do I say this? Because it has a default way that the world is built, having differences on that becomes compelling to navigate because you know what you're looking for and where you're looking for, and so you can identify when you've gotten to a place that you need or that matters to you. And I like the way that things are set up that way, where, yeah, it's not an official thing at all by any stretch of the imagination, but because they've set it up so that way, when you go through it, you have familiarity with the zones, you know what you're looking for, etc. It creates a very different experience from the base experience, but it means that you can kind of re-experience exploring the game while still maintaining the familiarity of it. So what I mean is, and what's exciting to me about it is, game worlds, when you know how everything connects together, can become old and familiar in a way that becomes kind of stale. This sort of change-up allows old areas to be familiar while the experience of exploring the game becomes new. It's a new sort of fresh experience. And I think that's really cool. I really like that. So I like the idea of exploring that. Projectile attacks can be kind of weird sometimes. The fact that that's obstructed for me is not particularly logical, but there it is. So, I don't know, that's just, I really like the idea, and it's something that I want to explore, is games that have this sort of randomization thing built into them. That have built in this concept of this zone is connected to this zone differently, and the result is that your paths that you take through the world are different. So it's like a familiar area, but the way that you're interacting with it is different. I actually really like the idea of, oh, cool, we can see the portal, of game worlds where there's a lot of interconnectivity and a lot of reason to pass through zones in different directions. We particularly want to go after the gardener, because that is a monk. Okay. So, having a game where you travel through a zone in a lot of different directions. I really like highly interconnected worlds because I think that they're very interesting, because one of the things that happens is when you travel through a zone in only one direction, you see that side of it. When you travel through something in multiple directions, you see multiple angles of it, and those multiple angles reveal to you differences in the area. If you've ever gone to and that's one of the things that was really brilliant about the original Dark Souls, but whenever you go through something in a different direction than you normally do, it feels different. It feels newer or fresher somehow, and that's something that I think this sort of randomization that I'm talking about can accomplish. but there's other things that can do that too. And it becomes very interesting to me the way that stuff can feel when you're going through them in different directions. And, ooh, an Echovolt shield. That's pretty cool. That's a really neat shield skin, actually. It looks kind of like a giant leaf. Well, that's one of the things that I like about the Dark Souls 1, is it does encourage you to go through a lot of the zones in different directions, and the world, at least the pre-Anor Londo world, is highly interconnected, which means that there's lots of paths to get through places. One of the, actually the things that I like about Dark Souls 1 is the limited fast travel, and the way that means you have to become familiar with the world map. This game does have fast travel, but it has very limited fast travel in terms of where you can fast travel to and from and stuff, which also to some extent accomplishes that. For example, I was debating whether or not to leave from here or from here. Looking at things, I think it probably would have been a bit faster to go to Unwaking Waters down this way, but that means that there's reasons to go through zones in different directions. Like, earlier on in this series, I went through... well, I can't show you on this map, but I went through the... oh, what's the term I'm looking for? Lost the term in my head. But anyway, I went through a bunch of prophecy zones, kind of, quote, backwards, unquote, the way counter to progression. Let's see what this shield is. I'm sure everyone's excited. Oh, +1 armor versus earth damage, and +59 health while hexed. That's not very good. It looks cool, but is not very good. There's a green version of these that I think has some good inbuilt mods, but anyway. What I'm saying is that this is, while it's a really neat skin, it is merchant fodder because it is not a very good set of stats. So I'm going to go ahead and clear out my inventory here. Honestly, I'm not sure why you don't necessarily need to see it, but next time we'll be going off to get the skill that I want to capture. And I don't like overload on my bar right now. Chaos Storm is not great for this either. Let's just put this on. Okay. So I'm going to clear out my inventory, and next time we will go ahead and capture the next elite skill that I want to get. So until next time, everyone, take care. Bye-bye.